All right. Hello, this is Feed Your Brain. I'm Luca Cerri.
I'm Daniel Cal.
I'm Ysabella Rodriguez.
And I'm Patrick Lindholm.
And today we are going to be interviewing Andre Cerri. And if you'd like to just introduce yourself and give us an idea of who you are, what you do, a little bit of background.
Sure. So I'm Andre Cerri. I've been in IT for 42 years. And my current role is as a service executive at InterSystems Corporation. They're headquartered out of Boston, Massachusetts. So, nice to meet you.
So for if anybody who doesn't know what a service executive does, do you mind just running us through like your typical duties within that role?
Right. So prior to that, I was a sales engineer for around 22, 23 years at InterSystems. I'm coming up on my 25th anniversary, which is a lot of post-sales technical work, doing proofs of concepts with customers. This is working for a database and integration platform company out of Massachusetts. And a couple of years ago, I decided I was getting a little tired of chasing the technology dragon all the time, which is really what a sales engineer is doing. And decided to move into a more onto the operational side, working with very large customers, banks, hospitals, that networks of hospitals, that kind of thing, to make sure, and the way I like to phrase is they don't move too close to the edge of the cliff, and ideally don't fall off the edge of it under my watch. So I'm working with them on operational practices. Are they using our products well? Are the systems, our products performing well for them? What issues do they have? Interfacing on high priority issues with our tech support group, kind of thing. So it's a little sort of higher level and a little less hands to the keyboard, but it's still be fairly technical at times. And the sales engineering background absolutely helps, partly because I know our products inside out. Okay.
Yeah. So you say that you took you're taking a more hands-off approach to the technical side right now. What is the most technical side that you have worked in?
The most technical side was, well, I mean, I built applications in the past, coding, and I work, as a sales engineer, you're building proofs of concepts, you can't sell $1 million database to a bank if you can't prove that you're better than Oracle or Microsoft or MySQL or MongoDB or whoever that happens to be, right? You can't just say, yeah, hey, we're better here, and look at the specs, and then they're going to write you a check for $1 million, $2, $3 million. That doesn't happen. You have to be able to prove it. So you need to be able to take what they have, right, and transform it, migrate it to your platform or your database or your code or whatever that happens to be, all right, and demonstrate to them that, look, see, we got lower total cost of ownership. We've got, we're faster, so you can run on less hardware. So you're now going to save $50,000 a month on AWS charges, for example, Amazon Web Services. And if I say anything that any of you guys aren't quite sure about, you don't understand what I'm saying, acronyms and things like that, okay, feel free to just say, whoa, what's AWS? What's MongoDB? What's, et cetera, et cetera. Just jump in, okay?
Okay.
All right.
So you say that you've been working 20 to 25 years as a sales engineer and then as a sales executive or a service executive, with InterSystems. What did you do before that specifically, and how did you get started?
Before that, so I started out life, how I got started was kind of interesting. So I graduated high school a year early and ended up going and working in not exactly a dead-end job, but a laboratory job, because in the early 80s in England, there were basically no real jobs to be had anywhere. There was nothing much going on at all. It was pretty bad. The economy was pretty bad. So I did this, and a friend of mine actually I was working with said, hey, there's the local community college has 6 weeks of evening classes of introduction to computer programming. You interested? I'm like, sure, why not? I have no idea. So I got into it 6 weeks, and after 6 weeks, I'm like, oh, I kind of like this. This is kind of cool. But it kind of stopped there until I was looking for another job and discovered that my aunt, who obviously Luca knows, actually worked for the Ministry of Defense. And I said, hey, what do I do for a job? So she goes, well, when you come and start in the clerical intake, and that's how we bring people into the Ministry of Defense. And by Ministry of Defense, that means MI6, for those of you who know your James Bond theory, right? And we just bring them in there and we just see where things go. And I'm like, all right. And it was 25% more pay than I was making. So I'm like, done. But I'd mentioned during the interview that I'd done this sort of background in, computer programming evening class. And just before I was due to start, they called me up and said, you seem a bit overqualified, because they had pretty good high school diplomas and stuff like that, what we call A levels in the UK. And they said, do you want to come up for an aptitude test? It's a computer programming programmer aptitude test. So I did that, aced it apparently. And a week later, or 2 weeks later, I was now making another 50% more than I was offered originally, and went into a full-on, hands-on 5-week training class, becoming a COBOL programmer, which is how I got started. So that's how I got into it. From there, I worked there for about 4 years. I then got a consulting job in Holland as a systems programmer, working in a rather, at what at the time was a rather obscure programming language, working for Shell Oil and Exxon. And then from there, that position was phased out. So I ended up meeting somebody at a conference who got me a job in Italy. So I worked in Milan, Italy for 4 years, initially as a sort of application programmer / consultant, and then sort of ended up running the development team there. Excuse me. And then that company sort of slowly started to fold. Nothing to do with me, of course, obviously, goes without saying. And then I started looking around for other jobs and got a job, would you believe, a tech support role in the US, working for a company. I knew a lot about their products, partly because I knew that if the job didn't work out, well, A, it would be very challenging, and B, if it didn't work out, I'd have full access to the customer base. And having worked for what was basically a database vendor, I could then just go out and basically start hitting up all of their customers all over the world, say, hey, yeah, you've got any positions available. Okay, so that's how I got to where I am today.
So you say that, or you mentioned all these different positions that you've worked in, that you've been offered, or and more. What other positions are there that you know of, and what kind of like either horizontal mobility between these are there, or is there like a different way to start a career in IT from like a different standpoint?
Well, things are a little different. I think that was one of the questions here. How does things compare to, when I first started? It's very different. Like, I sort of characterize this like, if I went to a party when I was like 22 and met somebody in IT, that was like wait a minute, what? And we'd chat probably all evening. Now, if you meet somebody at the party in IT, the chances of you having anything in common with that person is pretty negligible, right? The whole IT world has become so diverse and so widespread. So many people are in it doing so many different kinds of jobs that the chance of you having anything in common with anybody you meet like that is pretty low. It's not zero, but it's pretty low. Yeah. Okay. So, sorry, what was the original question?
Like within these different
I see, within the different
yeah.
disciplines, right? Okay, so yes, there's a large number of disciplines, and a lot of them have, like, for example, I deal occasionally with network engineers, or I work with storage engineers, and I have they're usually completely separate divisions within a large enterprise organization. Unless, of course, you're in a startup where you're doing everything yourself, right? You 2-3 people are just basically everybody does a bit of everything. I don't really have a lot of dealings with those guys, and their depth of knowledge of that particular vertical, if you will, has to get so deep that they could start talking network protocols to me, and I just sit there going, all right, you could be talking, cancer treatment or something like that. I have no idea what you're talking about at this point, So, that's a huge difference to when I first started, where there's a lot more, everybody knew a bit of everything. Right now, like in our own product lines, for example, is a great example of Inner Systems, that when I first started as a sales engineer, you could be pretty well an expert across the whole product line, right? I was pretty good. I knew our stuff inside out. I could do a demo on just about any technology with our product. Now, forget it. You can be really good at maybe 30% of our product line, because our own product lines have expanded so much, and there's so many different technologies at play. It's a very, very different ball game.
Yeah, part of the reason why I ask about like the difference between these disciplines and how one start in a career might be different from the other is the IT program, and the ICT specifically at FSU has a very broad range of courses they offer. So a lot of students don't exactly have a very deep understanding of certain levels, but they have a broad kind of idea of what things will look like. But the actual IT world is even bigger, and there's even more disciplines that the college is just not even able to to undertake? Like a sales engineer position, for example, is not one that you ever really hear spoken about when taking
Yeah,
IT courses. Or
that's not something you can really
like
be
that.
trained in. That's something, I mean, most sales engineers typically have to have sort of 5-10 years expertise across maybe a couple, 2 or 3 or more different disciplines, you know, and have a bit of, you need to be it's a sort of jack of all trades, master of none job. Right?
Yeah,
If you're really, really specialized as a storage or a network engineer, you're probably not going to make a good sales engineer. And a sales
Yeah.
engineer is a very different position to most, because it's been explained to me it's a very hard position to fill, because you need to be able to sit down, heads down coding for 2 weeks straight, working 12 hours a day, building a proof of concept, then present it to 150 people in a room for 3 to 4 hours, possibly even demoing it and rebuilding the demo in front of them.
Mm.
Right. And then from there, go and sit down with the CTO and basically explain to him why what you just did is so important to the value of the company. So you need to be able to this sort of jack of all trades, but also personality wise, it's a very difficult personality trait to fix, because a lot of people can do 1 or maybe 2 of those 3 things, but doing all 3 is pretty hard. It was a pretty hard shoes to fill. He says, beating his own chest and his own drum and everything. So, but it's been explained numerous times. It's a pretty hard slot to fill. But
yeah,
people who do it, like I can be listening into another sales engineer at InterSystems talking about our products, and he might miss something, and I'll be just about to interject to say, before he carries on, saying, you forgot to mention this, and then he'll say it. Like all of our InterSystems sales engineers pretty well think exactly the same way. They know how each other, you know, they work in the same, they have the same
Yeah.
mental agility, if you will.
So I'll ask one more question before I hand it off to Patrick next, but I also want to quickly say that due to free Zoom membership, we do have 9 more minutes. We may have to start a new call, record
Sure.
that one, and then just splice them together, but just pick up where we left off.
Yeah, okay.
But so the last question I'll ask before handing off the reins is, you talk a lot about how you know, the sales engineer has a need for technical skills, but also interpersonal skills. Which one do you think is more important? Which one is more valuable? I know having interpersonal skills in the career world as a whole is important, but in a tech-focused career, which one do you consider more important? Which one is more useful?
Well, technical skills, absolutely, because if you don't have the technical skills, you're just not going to cut it, right? But a big part of what I do, what we did as a sales engineer and what I do now as a service executive, is building relationships, right? Building trust with a customer, building or anybody else, teammates, building trust with teammates. It's the ability to, you know, to say, hey, if I drop the ball here, is somebody going to, you know, is a teammate going to be, you know, to be a team player, if you will. That's crucial, being able to build relationships with customers. You know, I've told you before, you know, I think, Luca, that I've been invited to weddings. I've been a customer funerals. I've been taken to Mardi Gras by a customer, for example, this kind of thing, right? So, I mean, having those close relationships and having, you know, I mean, you can't make your own personality. You're kind of born with it. And but having the ability to talk to people, just sit down at somebody in a coffee shop. We talked about this recently. Sit down at a coffee shop and somebody, you know, somebody mentions something on a phone call, and as soon as they hang up, you're just like, oh, I just heard you mention this. You don't want to be obtrusive. You don't want to force yourself on anybody. But you'd be amazed, you know, I got my job in Italy by discovering the guy in front of me was Italian, right? In the line for coffee in a break between sessions at a conference. And I just sort of tapped him on the shoulder and in pidgin Italian, which I didn't really speak much of at the time, and started asking him. We ended up meeting for lunch, and next thing you know, he goes like, yeah, you want a job? I'm like, that's the way it can work. You know, just having being outgoing. You know, a lot of IT guys can be very, you know, focused. And, you know, we have developers at InterSystems that we don't want to let out of the building, let alone meet customers. And I'm not joking. There's people who are we got some seriously disturbed folks, but they are incredible programmers. If you want to just do hardcore, sit in the corner of the room and nobody talk to you, we got people like that, you know, you sort of timidly knock on their door with a question and just hope that they're not going to tear your face off because they're in the middle of, you know, reinventing a complex piece of code. So, all right.
Cool. All right, so we do have 6 minutes left, but Patrick, I'll let you take over. And then if you're still going, I may cut you off just so we can restart the recording and begin the second session.
Sounds good. So I've already checked out your LinkedIn. That's where my questions are more like geared towards. Start off, I guess. I see you had a pretty impressive career as a consultant, and I just want to know like what advice you would have for someone like me or other incoming college graduates who will be starting consulting in the next few years. And if you could redo those prior positions, what would you do differently?
Well, that's a good question. Not do anything differently. I mean, getting started is you really need a solid sort of network, unless you're going to work as a consultant for, you know, Price Waterhouse or some big company like that, right? Which is a little different. The sort of consulting I did was on a much sort of more, much more focused level. I would basically work for myself for 7 years, 8 years, or whatever it was, something like that. So you need that network. You need to be prepared to go out and build your own network if you're going to do it for yourself, right? And that means going to trade shows, maybe starting in local groups, like I'm sure in Tallahassee there's local IT groups. What's it called? Isn't there something just called groups or something like that? Or Luke, I think you mentioned something to me recently about it, right?
It's called meetup.com. I
Meetup.com,
don't know how
that's it.
popular it is in Tallahassee, but it's pretty popular in
That kind of
Jacksonville.
thing. Once you move to a new town, you want to sort of start finding out what these networking groups are. You know, IT groups and things like that. Join the local Java developers group and the local, Linux admin group, that kind of thing, and just get your name out there. It probably won't go anywhere immediately, but it might. And if it doesn't go anywhere immediately, there's a good chance it'll get you somewhere at some point. Sooner or later, somebody's going to go, oh yeah, I know Dan, blah blah blah, and he said he's done this. Hang on, let me give him a call. Right, next thing you know, out of the blue, you'll get a call, possibly with a job opportunity, or a contract opportunity, something like that. So, building that network out is crucial. You know, if nobody knows who you are, unless they're going to find you on monster.com or whatever it is, or on LinkedIn, you're not going to get any work, right? So you've got to build that portfolio of contacts and things. Okay.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Back to your 12-hour work days and whatnot. How would you
work-life
describe,
balance?
yeah, how would you
Yeah, I'm looking at that.
work balance? And
Generally speaking, well, first off, depends. You need to decide for yourself. Do you live to work, or do you work to live? Right. It's crucial that you really want to identify that fairly early on, right? And how far do you love your job so much that you're prepared to let it intrude onto your personal life, right? Particularly if you're in a relationship, if you're married, blah, 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 if you've got kids, you really need to have a solid idea of what you want to get out of work. Personally, I work to live, right? When I first started, though, I'd be like taking a shower on the way up to the MOD in London. Before I was about to get on the train to go up to the MOD, obviously I didn't shower on the train, and I'd be sitting there and I'd be pondering like the issue that I saw the night before when I left work the next day. I'm like, okay, so when am I going to go about this? Oh, I know what I did wrong. Brilliant. And you couldn't wait to get to work when I first started. Right now, it's like it's more of a job. I mean, I enjoy a lot of what I do, but there's also some stuff that gets pretty rote, etc. But figuring out things like, am I prepared to carry a pager and be on call 24/7? Right. I've got some people I work with right now who are on call 24/7, and regularly on a weekend at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning, they get woken up. Some people thrive on that, right? You need to decide for you, is that work-life balance for you or not? Okay. Personally, I mean, and you can roll that into working remote. There's another question there about working remote versus on-prem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Working remote is not for everybody. It's a lot more for people these days, I think, but I've been doing it for 24 years now. I've been working remote, and although I guess I did a little bit when I was in Italy, I did some remote work there, but basically I love it. I can't imagine going back to a regular office unless it was just down the street, and I was working with a good bunch of people, a good group of people that were sort of fun to work with, etc. And I had an office, with a window with daylight, because otherwise it would be like, no, I'm just not even remotely interested. I mean, there's huge benefits. Time with family, time with kids, flexible working hours, assuming that your employer is going to let you do that. That's becoming more and more the norm. But you got to be careful with employers going forwards. Like, for example, InterSystems, where I work, is really trying to go back to a 5-day working week. Right now, we're hybrid for the folks who work out of the Boston office or the New York office. It's a 3 days in the office, 2 days remote, right? Mm-hmm. You need to be prepared. I know people up in Boston who have a 2-hour commute. each way. And they're prepared to do it, right? They want the job, they love the job, blah, 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 and they're prepared to do it. And, you know, in that particular role, they can't really be remote anyway. They'll do it, but you really need to figure that out as well pretty early on, like in your careers. Like, is that what you want, or is that absolutely not what you want?
Yeah.
I've never had a commute more than 30 minutes in my entire life, and that included commuting to
Interrupt right
Central
now.
London.
The meeting is about to end. So if we're just gonna cut it, start again, and re-record from there.
Okay, so this is my last question for you. I see you've worked internationally in your career, and I think that's super cool. How would you compare the two industries, or one industry, across different countries in your experience?
Good question. I don't know that I see a lot of difference beyond the obvious, which is if you move to a country where you don't speak the language, you're gonna have fun with that, particularly written language. I don't remember there being a huge transition. I was a little intimidated thinking I came to the US that it was going to be a whole lot more serious, and it wasn't really like that. I don't think I see a big difference. You know, the biggest thing is language, right? Like, you go to Holland, and where I worked, if anybody in the room wanted to speak English, everybody had to speak English. But then most people in Holland speak English. But you go to somewhere like Germany, Italy, Spain, it's going to be very, very different. So, and that's not just Europe, obviously, that goes for the rest of the world. So, but you go somewhere, you know, with English speaking in the UK or, you know, Australia, for example, you know, it's going to be a whole lot easier in that respect. Are you thinking about working overseas? Or?
I am open to the possibility. I think that'd be awesome. But
yeah, I mean, having language skills will be, and I don't mean programming language skills, but you know, real language skills is absolutely going to be a huge plus. Because, you know, I started working in Italy, and I basically learned Italian from the book that my mum bought in 1962 when she met my dad, who was Italian. Right, so that's how I learned Italian, basically with about 4 weeks' notice. And it was in at the deep end. There was one guy in a company of 30 people who spoke English of any real level.
Spanish, then.
Yeah,
exactly. So
that's an important question that we touch on, because a lot of people are kind of becoming more open to the idea of moving overseas, especially to Europe, because there's a booming IT industry in the Netherlands, in Germany, and a lot of those like very, very tech focused countries. Companies are, it's not like here where like there is still a need, but overseas they're starving for IT people. So a lot of people are considering moving over there. So if, that's why we ask about, like, you know, the cultural difference.
All right.
Okay, I have a quick question about the actual like recruitment process and actual how you get started into the IT company itself. So obviously, as you mentioned before, that you've been in this the tech industry for a while now. I wanted to ask, have you noticed any changes in the actual requirements that people are required to know, such as like technical skills? How have they developed over time as technology develops?
That's interesting. I mean, you got to remember, I haven't really changed positions in 25 years. I'm not the kind of guy who works for 2 years and jumps ship. You know, you can often look at people's LinkedIn profiles. If you're getting involved in hiring in any shape or form, you know, you become you start out as a lower level development manager, for example. You know, you can pick out the folks who are jumping ship every 2 years. And there's usually two reasons for that. One is they're desperately trying to claw their way up the ladder. I make another 3,000 in this job. I can make another 5,000 there, and I might learn new stuff. Or it turns out they're absolutely rubbish at what they do, and they get found out after. Because you can't. You don't always realize immediately that a new hire is no good. We have a really, really rigid hiring process, and so we don't get many bad eggs. But occasionally it does happen. You get what they call the empty suits. You know, particularly at the management level, you're going to be really careful there. But if you see they've got 18 months to 2 years between jobs, then, you know, that's usually a bit of a sign that either they aren't going to be around for long, or they probably won't be around for long. And one of those reasons might be because they're no good. So I don't know that I've seen anything different other than that personality traits, not necessarily that you have an outgoing personality, that you're a great guy, more of, you know, sort of what your goals are, where you see yourself, you know, how ambitious you are. Those kind of aspects of personality are maybe more important than when I first started. When I first started, it was like, well, can you program in XYZ? Oh, you're any good? Okay, and you got good references? Great, you're hired. Now there's a lot more in-depth. We do a lot of personality profiling in the systems. We have probably the highest retention rates of just about any company in the IT business. Our tech support people have an average tenure of about 8 years, something like that, I think. And we got people who've been in tech support for 20 years, right? And because some people love it, and if you hire the right people for the right job then there's a good chance they're going to stick around. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but I think that's all I got on that, really, just because I haven't really changed jobs much in a long time. So, all right.
I think I'm good with that question. But what you were talking about before, whether they get hired and they can get move on maybe like very soon, related to their actual skills. And I want to ask you, have you had to upskill or reskill recently due to development of technology? If so, what skills and how? Because recently, obviously, technology with AI and ChatGPT and like all this has been turning over and just like going into like a sort of new direction. But how will this like continue in the future?
I don't think there's a good answer. It's going to keep on changing. Everybody says, "Oh, why would we?" When web services came out, great, we got a great solution here. Web services, why? With XML web services, why would we ever use anything else? And then, sort of 10 years later, nobody's using web services anymore. They're all using REST APIs, etc., right? And JSON. Nobody even thought of it. There was a need for that, 10 years prior. I don't know that you can try and predict the future. I know where AI, chat GPT is going to take us. I really don't know. I mean, one of the questions is that going to start to eliminate positions? I think it's a little too early to be able to try and predict that. I mean, I've had to sort of continually grow my portfolio of sort of technical skills over the years to the point where I got kind of sick of it and sick of the phone calls going, yeah, you need to demo, XYZ in 2 weeks' time. And I'm like, I don't know anything about that. I know nothing about that at all. It's like, well, you're still gonna have to demo it. So find somebody in the company who does know a bit about it, have them show you what you need to do, and then take it from there. And just hope you don't look like an idiot in front of the prospect. Or if it's an existing customer and a new group within that customer, you're not going to look like a complete idiot. I don't really have to worry about that anymore. Again, I'm more of a sort of a little more senior and, more on the operational side. So I don't have to worry about new technologies like that quite as much as I used to. But you absolutely need to stay on top of that stuff. For anybody getting started in the industry, the more you can expose yourself to, the better, right? Absolutely think that. Okay.
And this last question sort of relates to the class that we're all taking, and talking about leadership in technology. And I'm just wondering how did your leadership style sort of change over the years?
That's kind of interesting because, my title is service executive, but that doesn't mean to say I got a large team reporting to me. I don't actually have anybody reporting directly to me at all. It's kind of viewed, if you've seen Game of Thrones, the Hand of the King. We have a VP of learning services and customer relationships, etc. And we have a small team of service execs there's about 5 or 6 of us, and we're all deemed as, we are the right hand of that VP. And, if we say something and we say, hey, I need this doing right now, the company in theory is supposed to say, oh shit, Andre needs this right now. Okay, let's jump a little bit. But I don't have any direct reports at all in that respect. Now, leading a customer is a little different. As a sales engineer, I was always told to act by my boss as if I was the CTO of the company. Right? Now, you can't talk to the CTO like I'm the CTO of his company, right? But you need to always think like, so what would I do if I was the CTO? What would I do if I was the, what's important to the CFO? Putting yourself in somebody else's shoes that you're dealing with is a pretty valuable skill. It's a little hard to do, and you've got to think outside the box a bit to do it. But you just need to flip the mirror around and go like, okay, if I was asking me this question, what kind of questions is he going to ask me? What's he trying to get out of this meeting, this development exercise, this application, etc.? What are they really trying to get out? So, that's changed a bit. I've gotten better at that over the years. I don't know that leadership style has really changed because I never really did that other than leading a small team of developers in Italy, but that was so long ago now. And I've kind of wiped those memory banks clean. That storage has been overwritten by now. So
The hard drive is
Right.
obsolete.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
that's a great segue into my next question, which is obviously you're working with a lot of different people in different industries, or in with different needs. So how do you kind of have conversations with them to highlight your product, but also like ensure that they're understanding what you need or what you're providing? Like, how do you kind of change your conversation?
well, I think to understand what they want is fundamental. So the biggest skill you can have, I think, in IT, or any skill period, is to be able to shut up and listen, right? Particularly if you're in a sales situation. If there's a silence, don't try and fill it. Because sooner or later, they say nature abhors a vacuum, right? Nature also seems to abhor silence. And if there's a pause, if you wait long enough, somebody on their side will fill it in, and they'll come up with stuff to fill that gap or that pause and that silence. And at that point, they can often let slip, things that are valuable to your sales process, or maybe even if it's not a sales process, but you can sometimes hear. I could be talking to, an implementation team, and I'm thinking they're not quite telling me something here. And then there's a pause. You let it sit out there for sort of 10 seconds. Just sit there, tapping your pen on the desk, whatever. And all of a sudden somebody go, oh, yeah, we've been meaning to tell you about this, that, and the other. And you're like, aha, here we go. Whereas if I tried to fill that and go like, oh, so tell me a bit, try and force the conversation, you can get a lot from leaving the silence out there. It's a really good skill to have, I think. Did I answer the question though? Again, I've forgotten what the question is.
You definitely did. I was just
too busy filling the silence, right?
It was about how you communicate with teams and going in with the industries. And so, I think filling the silence is a really great point. And as far as like soft skills, because I think a lot of students right now are thinking about what languages can we learn, or, hard skills that they can learn now. So with that, what hard skills and what soft skills do you feel like are important in IT?
Well, again, that ability to listen, the ability to identify when a supposed expert is not a supposed expert at all. Because if I was just to sit here and start talking to you about some programming language you'd never heard of, right? And I could start going in real detail because you don't know anything about it. You sit there and go, wow, this guy really knows his stuff, right? Because you don't know anything about it. You've really got to be careful with that, because I've run into people, particularly like in large enterprises, storage people, right? You'll have a terribly performing database and everybody's like, well, we don't know. It's not us. It can't be the storage because, the SAN is worth $5 million and we know what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. And time again, all of a sudden the problem just suddenly fixes itself and nobody will confess to it. And the more you dig into those kind of folks, you discover that they don't actually know what they're doing. And you've got to be kind of careful of that, I think. Is a good skill to be able to identify when somebody's full of shit, basically, and they don't know what they're talking about. And avoiding super alpha characters who just try and lead every conversation and steer you in the direction that they want conversations to go, as opposed to where you want it to go. And that can be a tough skill to sort of be able to bring people back on track, if you will, back into the conversation that you want to have. That's sort of difficult to do because you've got to be a little bit alpha yourself, right? So, I see there's another question here. Was this most in-demand tech careers currently? That's a good one. I'm looking at the rest of it. Sorry, I'm skimming ahead to the other questions here. I'm cheating a little bit. Yeah, looking ahead here, right?
With that, what are the most in-demand tech careers?
Well, where it's more a case, it's not so much in demand. That's something you can probably go out and Google what are the most in demand ones. The thing we're seeing a lot more of, ignoring AI and where that may end up taking us, who knows, and the end of civilization, blah, blah, blah. But security is really becoming a bigger deal. I don't know if it's calmed down a little bit recently, but having good skills with security configuration, and you're never going to be out of work if you're in security, I don't think. I don't know that AI is going to basically be able to take over that. There's a possibility that it would make it sort of kind of superfluous, but right now, good security people they seem to be really in demand from what I can see. You know, it's a huge issue. I mean, ransomware is a massive concern for just about any organization. You know, you have to basically say, if we lost everything tomorrow, our entire IT department just basically had to start from a blank slate, what would that do to the organization? Like if that happened to, I don't know, a big hospital in Tallahassee, right? I mean, I deal with this kind of stuff, right? Are you prepared for the fact of what would happen if you lost everything tomorrow? Would you still be able to treat patients? This kind of thing. And so being able to prevent that kind of experience or that kind of circumstances to become reality is a big deal, and having good security people is a huge deal, I think. And then good cloud services skills as well, AWS, Azure, GCP, that kind of stuff. Those are good skills to have as well. Assuming you guys working with containers and stuff like that on the tech side, you working with that at all, or
specifically me, I mean, I don't know about everyone else, but I have worked with, I like you mentioned before, I worked with AWS and MongoDB as well. But it's very, very limited, just basic knowledge anyway.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, there's a huge surge towards that. The company I work for is a little backward in that respect, and we've really seen a massive push towards it. The chop with AWS and, cloud hosted services, everybody thinks it's going to save them money, where it's actually the opposite. Right, it reduces the know-how necessary to keep systems up and running and keeping them fairly secure, or hopefully very secure. But everybody thinks they're going to save money by moving to the cloud, and it's usually the opposite. It's not only more not cheaper; it can be a lot more expensive, which is pretty interesting. So that was a big eye opener for us as a company, I think. And for our customers as well, they thought they were going to save money hand over fist. It's like, no, it ain't going to be like that at all. So that was kind of interesting.
And then one final question for you. Obviously, your career progression was kind of very moving around and a lot of things of that nature. But based on your experience and mutuals in the same field, what do you see career progression looking like for someone entering the industry now?
Good question. The big issue is, as I've seen with other family members, is getting started. Is getting that first job. You really have to go all out, I think, to really try and secure that first position, even if it's an internship, even if it's just something that's low paid. Getting your resume built out with, hey, yeah, I've done a year of Java, or I've done 2 years of Python, or whatever it happens to be, or I've done this networking, or this networking technology, or I'm cloud services engineer, etc. So whatever it is you feel is a good way to get started. I mean, you might find that in the early days you move around from two or three disciplines, and a lot of that depends on what are you going to find what you really like immediately. I was lucky. I kind of fell into programming really early, and I loved it. I thought it was great. I'm like, oh my God, this is so much fun. I go to sleep at night thinking about a problem and wake up about it the next morning. It was a good thing. Now if I fall asleep thinking about a problem, it's usually a pretty bad thing. It's a pretty nasty, thorny problem, right? But very rarely do I I'm washing my hair in the shower and blah blah blah. Oh yeah. No, I'm usually thinking about what's for dinner tonight, or the concert I'm going to this weekend. I'm sort of past it, if you will. I mean, like I said, I've been doing this for so long, I'm almost a little burnt out with it. But as for question 19, career progression usually look like. Oh, I thought you said after the tech industry. So I don't know if I'm there yet, but so getting started is, I don't envy anybody trying to get started in it. It's, you really ideally cultivate those connections in local groups. The more you put yourself out there, the more people are going to go, oh, these guys are pretty ambitious. They seem pretty smart. They're engaging, etc. You know what? We got an entry-level position coming up. Don't worry too much about the salary unless the money's absolutely critical for life, right? Just get in on the ground floor, spend 6 months a year, paying some dues, if you will, maybe doing some some crappy tech support job, even if it's something like that, if it's a technical tech support job, right? As opposed to, no, I was going off on a tangent there. That kind of thing. I think anything to get in, boots on the ground, in through the first door, because once you're in through the first door, you're immediately exposed to 10, 20, 40, 50, 500 other tech people who at some point are also going to leave and go off somewhere else. So now you've got your network is sort of spreading its wings a little bit, and that can really help you find positions elsewhere, right? Somebody works with with Dan, for example, and they go off and work at I don't know, a bank's IT department, and you just happen to meet them for a drink or something like that. Or Dan happens to meet this guy for a drink. He goes like, "Yeah, so what are you doing? I'm getting kind of a bit bored. I'm not sure I'm really enjoying this anymore. I want to go somewhere else. You got any positions available?" Well, yeah, actually, yeah, we're looking to hire, blah, blah, blah. And you want to keep cultivating, if you will, your network like that. I think is really, really valuable, and so, and that goes back to relationships. It's not just with customers, but it's with colleagues and things like that, and keeping those going. You can't buy relationships in that respect. You can't buy that kind of level of connectivity. I think it's a really good thing. All right.
Yeah. So I think that is the last of our questions. Do you have any closing remarks to leave us off with?
Me or
Yes.
Ysabella?
No, you.
Go for it. What have you got to lose? Go for it. Have fun. Try and make it as fun as possible. You don't want to be, as the other phrase that Lucas heard me say a lot of times is, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life, right? And I really felt like that. Like I wasn't really working in the early days. The first 5-10 years or so of the career, I really didn't feel like I was particularly working. I'm like, this is fun. I'm enjoying this. Oh, wow, look what I did, kind of thing, right? And this was, back end systems back in before, this was pre-Windows, right? Let alone the web and everything like that. Wow, this is fun. I got this system to do this. Basically, I helped track down these terrorists in blah, blah, blah in Iran or whatever it was, this kind of stuff. And it was fun stuff. If you can, again, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I can't say that often enough.
Yeah.
And figuring out, this work-life balance thing. Do you live to work or do you work to live, or is it somewhere in between? And how is it in between? I think my work-life balance is great. Right. I mean, I got to wake up, got to watch the all three of my strapping young men here become strapping young men from bawling little babies. Yes, Luca, I'm looking at you. And you can edit that out later. And as I'm sure you will. But, I got to be around because I was working remote and I was working from home. I had business travel, etc. But, it worked really, really well for me. And, I certainly wouldn't change that. And if I could have made 30% more, by working in a regular office, I wouldn't have done it. That's another aspect of work as well. You need to figure out business travel. Is that something you're prepared to do? Is that something that excites you? Or you're like, oh God, no, I don't want to do that. Figure that out fairly early as well. So it's something else, but I forgot what I was going to say. So.
That's fine.
All right.
Yeah. Well, we thank you for your time. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to speak to us.
Fun. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to my monologues. That was great.
Very
It's fun chat to you guys. So if you have any other follow-up questions or you want to chat anymore, any one of you, just go through Luca, reach out to me. I'm quite happy to chat to you. So, all right.
Yeah.